It was a short-lived magazine, is kind of the most important thing to remember about it. John was dealing with the major existential questions about his future. But decades later, what I really remember is the youth of it. It was a kind of can-do spirit, like a true commitment to doing something new, being part of John's enthusiasm. John was absolutely our leader. I said to you that he was miraculous. A person that famous should not be that giving. You would not expect them to be as generous and thoughtful and intuitive. He was famous for having a learning disability that got him in trouble with the bar exam, but his emotional intelligence was acute. He understood the dynamics among us. He understood the impacts of stories ahead of our ability to get it. He also knew that the huge sphere of politics that affects all of our lives was leaving an entire readership behind. There's a thing that happens in magazines in our era where they can be this laboratory for young talents. That's a bigger legacy than whether the magazine stayed open forever. Sure. A lot of those people who got a start with us went on to big careers elsewhere, and maybe they remember the things that they got to do with us as more free.
I'm Jill Demling, and this is Going Rogue. Today's guest is writer and editor Ned Martel. He was inside two of the most ambitious magazine experiments of the modern era. First, George Magazine, John F. Kennedy Jr.'s attempt to make politics cultural, then Men's Vogue, Condé Nast's push to rethink American masculinity. These weren't just magazines, they were tests. In this conversation, Ned and I talk about what worked, what didn't, and what happens when institutions move faster or slower than culture itself. After print, Ned made a pivot into television, working with Ryan Murphy where queerness isn't coded, it's centered. This isn't about nostalgia, it's about risk and what magazines once dared to do. This is Ned Martel, Going Rogue. If you're enjoying these conversations, please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen. It helps more people find the show and keeps these stories alive. Hi, Ned.
Hi, Jill. Good to see you.
You too. I mean, I cannot believe you have sunshine behind you. Beautiful green through those windows.
It's a banana tree. Yeah, it's happening.
You're like healthy looking with the glow. And I'm like,
that way.
Sunken eyes. A little bag here, a little shadow there. So I'm so glad we finally get to do this.
Me too.
Yeah.
I've admired so many of the ones you've done. I'm really happy for you.
And this only took us like a long time to figure out.
Well, it's summer. Who knows?
Yeah, and you're in television. Like you guys have a whole different kind of schedule out there. But, you know, when I was booking those early Men's Vogue covers, George Clooney for the premiere issue, Kiefer Sutherland, you were the one shaping the stories behind them. I even remember going up to Derek Jeter at Socialista once, trying to convince him to do the cover of Men's Vogue. Maybe I used it as an excuse to go up to him. I don't remember.
And then the best of intentions always.
Yeah, and then Jon Stewart, I tried and failed time after time. He just couldn't get over the Vogue, the Men's Vogue. He thought it was, I guess, too femme for him. Little did he know it was not femme at all. But we'll get to that. Now that we're both outside the glass tower, we can actually talk about what really happened at Men's Vogue and George, two of the most fascinating magazine experiments that both, ended the same way. Before we dive into your magazines, I want to set the stage for our listeners about Men's Vogue, because unlike Teen Vogue, which transformed and survived, Men's Vogue is a ghost that many people don't even remember existed. Okay, so here's what our listeners need to know. Men's Vogue launched in September 2005 as Anna Wintour's pet project. Jay Fielden was editor, this soft-spoken Texan who Anna had hired from The New Yorker to be Vogue's art editor in 2000. She said Jay was her first choice because, and I quote, he's sort of the target reader. And who was that target reader? A man over 35 earning more than $100,000 a year. As publisher Tom Florio put it, did you ever wonder who are the guys on the arms of the women who read Vogue? Jay told the press the guy picking up men's Vogue, quote, is not a reader who is interested to know about the latest purple sandals to come down the runway. This is a guy who is much more tuned into what a good suit can convey. But here's the context. Condé was already juggling a soap opera of men's magazines, and it was getting messy. They had details which they'd acquired in 1990. By the time Men's Vogue was launched, Dan Perez was running details, and as he later revealed in his memoir, taking up to 60 Vicodin pills a day. This was the roaring 20s of magazines, as one writer called it. Expense accounts, town cars, apparently drug abuse. No, just kidding. One person. They just launched Cargo in 2004, this shopping magazine for men that would fold by February 2006. They tried Vitals, which I don't even remember. It was like they kept...
It was good.
It was?
Yeah.
It was like they kept throwing men's magazines at the wall to see what would stick. The fundamental problem, Condé Nast already had GQ, which was crushing it. So Men's Vogue was trying to find space between its own dysfunctional siblings and what the press called a crowded field of men's titles. The first issue had 164 advertising pages, the highest for any Condé Nast introduction. Hinckley Yachts, Kitan suits, rare Scotch distillers. I actually loved that story. I remember that, the distillery story. By 2008, we'd expanded to 10 issues a year, and we're about to raise our rate base to 400,000 from 350,000. In March, Adweek named Men's Vogue Startup of the Year. But here's the reality. Ad pages were down 11% through November 2008, dropping to 588 pages from 662 the year before, despite publishing 2 additional issues. The financial crisis was hitting hard. The party was ending, not just for Men's Vogue, but for the whole bloated magazine industry. October 30th, 2008, Charles Townsend, Condé Nast president and CEO, announced Men's Vogue would shutter as a standalone title. The December-January 2009 issue would be the last. You'd become a biannual supplement to Vogue, part of what they called Condé Nast's across-the-board belt-tightening, quote. The magazine had about 80 employees, most of whom knew they wouldn't be retained to put out a twice-yearly supplement. I remember when you were let go and the drama around that, which somehow I became involved with.
I remember.
Yeah, what's fascinating is that the European versions worked. Uomo Vogue in Italy since 1967, Vogue Homme in France. They had prestige, longevity, influence. But in America, as the critics predicted, men stayed away from anything with Vogue on the cover. Some readers loved it, called it smart, insightful, elegant. Others found it utterly ignorable. Too Manhattan-centric, too focused on hedge fund social events. It was a magazine that couldn't quite figure out what it wanted to be in a company that couldn't quite figure out how to publish for men. As one former magazine editor put it, those that are the Oracle never think they're one day not going to be the Oracle any longer. The building was overstocked with Oracles, high in their own supply, literally in Dan Perez's case. Okay, so now that everyone understands the beautiful drugged-up doomed experiment we're a part of, let's talk about your journey to get there. So I'm going to do this as a Cliff Notes, and then and in general, how I'm going to do this, because I find it easier, is clusters of questions just to lead you things that I think might be important for the listener to hear, but you take it away and inform us however you want. And
I'll dive in, no problem.
Yeah, because only you know what happened during that time and what you want to say. So let's start at the beginning. Through these conversations I've been having, I've realized that many, if not all of my guests knew at a very young age what they wanted to do, or at the very least where their interests lied. Whether they knew it could be a career, whether their parents were supportive, and how they would get there. All TBD. Let me give our listeners a quick version of your background and you fill in the blanks. You're from Baltimore, youngest of four in a big Irish Catholic family. 7 of your 8 great-grandparents were first-generation Irish. Your first-grade teacher told your mom you were too verbal to get into fights. Classic writer origin story. You
It's
went,
true.
you went to UNC, and in December 1988, your best friend, Lindsay Otenisek, was coming home from a semester in London for Christmas when a terrorist planted a bomb on Pan Am Flight 103. Her body was found in a backyard in Lockerbie, Scotland. That spring, public policy magazine editor Charlie Peters comes to your campus. You tell him you want to be a fiction writer or work in film, and he says, quote, "The world is more interesting than you can make up." He tells you to follow that, pose interesting questions, demand answers. You actually turn down Graydon Carter at Spy, which is insane, to follow Charlie's advice. You go work for Charlie, then newspapers in DC and Florida, freelance for Outside and others, do an environmental policy fellowship at University of Michigan. And then at 27, your big break, running the front of book at George magazine for JFK Jr. So before we get to George and Men's Vogue, I'd love to hear about those early years and the years leading up to George. Were there other writers in your family? What pushed you toward this world of magazines and storytelling? And I'm curious, as your sexuality plays a role in what we'll be discussing, I would love for you to talk a bit more about that, and if there's any foreshadowing in your early years as to how your identity would intersect with your future career. Take it away.
Well, I appreciate your interest in me. That's so kind of you to, prepare as much as you had just to get that out of me, because I don't really talk about the early chapters of my life. And as a writer, they really do. They're your resource with everything you connect with, whenever you're trying to connect with an audience. And I am indebted to this really loving, talkative Irish Catholic family where there's a lot of music and there are a lot of adventurers. They all are from the same place. They all live still in Baltimore, pretty much. Oh. And we have a patriarch that we still kind of look up to in this extended family, and that's my mom's father, who was an orphan from Southern Maryland, who rose to become the president of the Maryland State Senate. Wow. And almost all of his 6 kids were great storytellers. And then on my dad's side, just a different version of the same. And I just kind of grew up hearing all these voices, like the great family dramas of theater and film. It's kind of very familiar to me. Okay, so that's where I come from. I have this very preppy upbringing. I had a lot of educational privileges, but our family was kind of, upper middle class eventually. And when I got to high school, my friend Lindsay and I, who you mentioned, all we wanted to do was think about Manhattan. We loved the films of Nora Ephron and Woody Allen, Annie Hall, anything that got us into this land of even more intense. I'm just going to say that word conversation again. It was like a cacophony. Like you knew there was like wit and adventure and sex and freedom, and that it was going to be another world when we got older. So as you mentioned, my friend Lindsay, I had gone to Europe for my junior year abroad, and then right when I got back, she tried to duplicate the same experience, and she was in this incredibly terrible geopolitical event where a Toshiba boombox with Semtex blew up in the baggage hold of the plane that was bringing her home for Christmas. And nothing has ever been the same. I mean, just imagine you're 21 years old, the person who's almost a sibling. And I think about a gay kid and a straight female best friend. They're just like kind of a unique relationship. We were both the last in our family, we were the youngest in our family. So all of our siblings were in college and we were very connected. So she was gone all of a sudden in a traumatic, violent way. So as you said, Charlie Peters is this like almost Yoda figure who's so important to a lot of famous journalists, Michael Kinsley, Timothy Noah, James Fallows, James Bennett. Many people had a start at a training ground in a little public policy magazine founded. So I was pretty sure I wanted to go to New York, and I got this opportunity to interview with Graydon Carter, and I got the job. And then suddenly I was like, no, this event that happened just before Lindsay's death was going to spur me to explain the world that just took her away. That I was going to go into DC and see what government was and see what geopolitical power was. Right. And I was going to make sense of it. And that's a daunting kind of adolescent aim, but that's kind of where I went. And I was like, I'll drop everything. I'll drop every advantage. I'll drop every dream to go in this world. And it was a spectacular world. It was like Capitol Hill. It's like a special world in the 80s and 90s with a kid in a thrift store Brooks Brothers suit could kind of go anywhere and talk to anybody because you have a press badge. And I had a great experience. And that led me within years to go this like special job working for John Kennedy Jr., which was the best of all the worlds I'm describing.
Let me set that up. I got a setup for you there.
Ready?
Okay. At 27, you land at George Magazine. Let me give our listeners the full context about what George was, from its revolutionary beginning to its tragic end. September 1995, John F. Kennedy Jr. and his business partner, Michael Berman, launched this monthly magazine with the tagline, "Not just politics as usual." The concept was radical. Treat politics like entertainment, politicians like celebrities. Make politics accessible and sexy for a generation that found traditional political coverage boring. That first cover with Cindy Crawford dressed as George Washington. It was a statement. This wasn't going to be the New Republic or The Nation. Critics were horrified. Quote, the political magazine for people who don't understand politics, they called it. Traditional journalists said it was dumbing down democracy, but initially it worked. George hit a circulation of over 400,000 at its peak. For a political magazine, that was huge. They got A-list celebrities to pose in historically themed shoots, Drew Barrymore as Marilyn Monroe for a Clinton tribute, Harrison Ford as Abraham Lincoln. They landed interviews with major political figures who saw it as a way to reach younger voters. The magazine was this fascinating mix, serious journalism from writers like Norman Mailer and Ann Coulter, alongside celebrity profiles and fashion spreads. It was trying to bridge two worlds that had never really mixed before. But by 1999, George was struggling. Ad sales were declining, circulation was dropping. Critics said it never found its identity. Was it serious journalism or celebrity fluff? Kennedy was reportedly looking for new investors, and his relationship with Hachette Philippaki, the publisher, was strained. Then July 16th, 1999, Kennedy, his wife Carolyn, and her sister Lauren took off in Kennedy's small plane from New Jersey, heading to Martha's Vineyard for a wedding. They never made it. The plane crashed into the Atlantic Ocean. All three were killed. The magazine tried to continue. There was an immediate surge in interest, people wanting to connect with Kennedy's legacy. They put out tribute issues, but George was so intrinsically tied to its founder that without him, it had no center. The momentum couldn't be sustained. Hachette announced the magazine would close. The final issue was published in early 2001. In just 6 years, George went from revolutionary concept to another dead magazine. Sound familiar? So at 27, you land at George Magazine. Tell us how this happened, from the interview process with JFK Jr., because I always have to ask everyone about their interview with Anna Wintour, but I mean, hello, the sexiest man to ever live, to what it was actually like working there. Because going from newspapers to suddenly being in Kennedy's orbit, creating this completely new kind of magazine, paint that picture for us.
Well, Jill, part of why I wanted to reconnect with you in this forum is because how seriously you take the process of making great images. And when you're replaying some of the criticism that George came up against, which a lot of it was fair, but it was a kind of cultural bias against anything with what we would just say a photo shoot, like an
Right.
elaborate, well-crafted, well-planned shoot with either it's in an environment or it's in a studio and you plan the outfit. There was a real antipathy toward elected officials or public officials ever being in that space. It was considered outre. It was considered unserious. You heard that word. And it was also considered the provenance of people in the entertainment world, which was manufactured and therefore false and not authentic. But that's not true. It was already happening well before my career or yours.
Right.
And, you know, it was Annie at Rolling Stone, and before her, Abaddon at Rolling Stone.
Yeah,
They were
the time period that's why I'm doing these setups. The time period in everyone has to think about where we are when the criticism is happening, right? So it's not just
we're getting started in 1995.
Yeah, exactly. So
and these kinds of images had been in Vogue. Vogue took portraits of Winston Churchill.
Yep.
Rolling Stone, they included among all the rock and rollers, Avedon taking a series of portraits of the Nixon administration, including, you know, the head of the Defense Department. Like, it existed, and they were planned, and they were artful, and they were smart, and they captured personality in a way that words could not.
Right.
So when you have these writers seeing this interloper magazine with a famous person, which is an advantage that no other magazine had, jumping into their world, they became gatekeepers, as we're familiar with now.
Yep.
And there was almost nothing we could do to please them. And every success we had drew another enemy, including people who had been mentors of John's. Right. So what do you want to do? Like, you've been up against the ropes before. You've been second guessed. Yeah. And the only thing you can do is keep competing. And
the proof is in the sales, people.
Yeah, or even the images, or the story that no one saw coming, or the weird juxtaposition of Madonna explaining on a single page why she wanted to be president, or what she would do if she had the chance to be president.
And let's be real, what I've learned from Anna over the years, and just with the, you know, that for a couple of years we had that research, people were, I don't know who they're researching with, but that controversy sells, indifference doesn't. So someone buys a magazine if they love it or hate it equally. So
I think that's right.
Yeah. So the last thing you want is someone that people don't care about, or a magazine people don't care about. Hating it still draws interest, right? People are still talking about it.
Yeah, interest drivers, always. So you asked about John. I can picture my first meeting with him. I remember he was at a copying machine, and that's significant because he was doing his own copying.
Yeah.
And my interview with him was a lot about the Senate, where I had been a reporter, and a lot about the DC culture, where I had lived after college. And I had not lived in New York before. I had just been in this weird program in the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. It was like a fellowship. And I was leaving that to come to his startup. I had written for it before I interviewed for it. And they were expanding because they had a year of early success. My friends who were the ad people said this was their way of selling ads. It was like George Magazine, like literally the phones would not stop ringing with people wanting to put their ad in that magazine. So I was part of the expansion team. I was hired on the same day of my good friend Susanna Honeywell, and we were thought to bring something. She was sort of literary and women's magazines, and I was kind of an unusual nerd from DC, you know, like a person who knew the personalities down there in a way that would help these Manhattanites.
What did Charlie say? Did you talk to him before you took the job?
I talked to him when I took the DC job. I worked as a Capitol Hill reporter in DC. He helped me then. Charlie, I did not talk to him until, no, he was not my consistent advisor through that. Okay. He cared about John Kennedy, and he cared about John's father, and he had worked for him. He had worked in the Peace Corps and something else. Anyway, so he was a sort of Kennedy person. Remember, I'm Irish Catholic family. There's almost
of course,
no more important political figure. And I also had a kind of entree to New York life through my college roommate and his family, who were they were theater people, and they kind of gave me a place to stay. I stayed in his parents' apartment on the Upper West Side on the morning that I had to go see John, and they fixed me a special meal and straightened my tie. It was very sweet.
That's so great.
Yeah, and but anyway, the thing. It was a short-lived magazine, as is the kind of the most important thing to remember about it. It did not, quote unquote, succeed. At the time of John's death, he was dealing with the major existential questions about his future. But decades later, what I really remember is the youth of it, the sense that it's not like the good ship lollipop where everybody got along every minute, but it was a kind of can-do spirit, like a true commitment to doing something new, being part of John's enthusiasm. John was absolutely our leader. After a sort of rough start with a different executive editor, he had taken the reins and led idea meetings. We even did postmortems after an issue closed to see what we could do better next time, which was kind of brutal. But
sure.
Anyway, I said to you that he was miraculous because
Right,
a person that famous should not be that giving. You would not expect them to be as generous and personal and thoughtful and intuitive. He was, famous for having a learning disability that got him in trouble with the bar exam, but really his, I guess we would now say emotional intelligence was acute. Like he understood the dynamics among us. He understood the impacts of stories ahead of our ability to get it. He also knew that the huge sphere of politics that affects all of our lives was leaving an entire readership behind, as women were not engaging in magazines like you mentioned, the New Republic, or even the small magazine where I work, the Washington Monthly. We needed to find different story formats and presentations of public figures to get more people involved, to get more women involved, to get a new kind of community, as magazines often try and build in that subscriber base. And it did work. I guess we're going to get to Men's Vogue, but the thing when I see how short they were and how they take a kind of drubbing for closing, it's thought that way because they had a lot of potential, and they did fulfill like a skyrocket when they started, a kind of commercial potential.
Well, if you think about George now, I mean, before we get into kind of like the ending of George and just that impact on you, having not that long before gone through a similar loss, what do you feel like George, that its existence changed anything about the industry now? Did it allow anyone to come up that probably wouldn't have without that example? And has anything come close to, I don't think so, replacing it or moving into the space that it kind of carved out with all your sweat, blood, and tears? Do you see what its legacy is, other than, at least people are talking about it, at least CNN's talking about it, at least people are remembering? Because listen, I've seen the attempts of starting magazines. You've been part of a few and lived to tell about it, but it's not easy. And it's not easy, because you have those magazines that have been around forever that aren't going to make it easy for a new one to come in, right? And then just kind of, you kind of read what you know. There's only so many magazines you can buy. There's only so much time you have.
He made a decision early on that he wasn't going to accept political ads. So your endemic category is gone. So then how is fashion going to find a way into that? How is entertainment going to find a way into that? How are media publications and books and TV shows and movies going to find a way into funding a monthly magazine, a glossy magazine? That's a tough one. Yeah. So that's the conundrum he created. Is it winnable? It kind of is, because you could see people wanting to be a part of it because they had just this intense affection and curiosity about who he was and who he wanted to announce himself as. And that happened in every issue. Like he read everything, he signed off on everything. They were true statements of what he wanted in that media conversation in 1994 to 97.
Were there
And
people you couldn't get?
yeah, I mean, there were. I think you're so familiar with booking covers. You would get people sometimes because they were friends with him. You would get people sometimes because they wanted to be friends with him, and then sometimes there'd be people you couldn't get just because they wanted to say no to him. Like
Right. Of course. Well,
too powerful.
oh yeah. I mean, I could
Yeah,
tell you Julia Roberts, Anna Winter. Like,
intense.
there's going to be
Yeah,
the
I don't know
power
any of the
thing.
details.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Again, we're going to talk about swinging dicks a lot later.
I wanted.
But
I
that's
wanted to say,
definitely,
just in that group of young people, like people who were just coming up, and Coulter, who I edited, and you mentioned that, which is so
yeah,
nice, and Norman Mailer, who we did not start his career, but
yeah.
we welcomed him with open arms. That was my friend Biz's
That's amazing.
booking. But like, I just wanted to say, these other people, they're all
Yeah,
like babies. We were
yeah.
like 20s, we're in the late 20s. Tucker Carlson.
Oh,
Uh,
what?
Yes, he wrote for us. Jim Vandehei, who founded Axios and Politico. Julia Eilperin, who's an incredible reporter at the Washington Post and editor. Jessica Yellen, she was CNN White House correspondent, and she
Oh
has
my
an amazing
God.
Substack. Steve Broderick, still an amazing magazine writer. Nora O'Donnell, she wrote for me a lot. Doug Brinkley, Lisa DiPaolo,
Wow.
Paul Begala. I mean, on and on. I just thought about my friend Matt Berman, who's my Gemini brother. We're like totally close friends. We were both closeted through our George experience. Sorry to bring that up, Matt, but it was true. But we worked at George Magazine. Matt was a visionary from Chef Filipaki. There are many magazines that he worked for, including Elle, before he got to George. He designed that amazing logo.
Oh,
He and
wow.
John were very close friends, and it really shaped those covers and those concepts, which were fun. I mean, they really were. But he discovered major photographic talent. Platon, Jake Chesson, he hired and discovered. Nick Knight and Wayne Mazer did great work with them.
Yeah,
The illustrators, Adrian Tomine and Eddie Bowen. So, there's a thing that happens in magazines in our era where they can be this, laboratory for these young talents. I actually think that's a bigger legacy than whether the magazine stayed open
for sure.
forever. And a lot of those people who got to start with us went on to big careers elsewhere. And maybe they remember the things that they got to do with us as more free, as an open-ended time where their creativity first found their voice. I actually do believe that. I know that's true of me as a writer, but I could see it in writers that I edited. But I really could see, because it was such a visual medium, that Matt and his team got a lot out of these new photographers. Platon became like the signature political photographer. He
Well,
had
and
that
I'm
kind
sure looking back, listen, I mean, this is your first magazine experience. I bet, and I know with you, but with everybody else, when you go on and work for other leaders, they're supposed to be leaders, the editor in chief, and you started with someone like him, the way you describe what that working culture and just that openness and the freedom and the listening and the camaraderie, like, then you appreciate even more what he was like to work for, what that experience was like, right?
he wanted us to be competitive too. We were competing against big people. Vanity Fair, remember, had like a
Yeah, of course.
love hate with us. Rolling Stone, we were taking some of their advertisers or some of their, the attention economy. We were
Yeah.
dominating the trades for outrageous, the small outrages and then big successes. Like sometimes
Right.
we just got a lot of attention. I mean, we haven't even mentioned the electrifying person who was Carolyn Bessette and how encouraging she was to all of us. And it was personal and professional. She had a lot of relationships and resources that she brought to bear. She was not calling shots in the editorial meetings. Matt Berman was the creative director, and he had all the experience in the world to do the
Yeah.
great job that he did.
Yeah.
But we were all, I have to say, it's just like an encouragement of this very sparkly person
Yeah.
who was our biggest advocate. I mean, down to the person. It was extraordinary.
And because you bring up closeted, was that because you just been living that way, or was it specific to this job, or was it just, why do I have to even bring it up? What's it anyone's business?
No, it was crucial. I mean, I'm from Baltimore, you're from Massachusetts. They're two kind of Catholic dominated cities. There weren't a lot of gay people who are out and role models. I mean, I'm friends with John Waters now, and I can see him as a person I used as a beacon as a kid.
Yeah.
But I really wanted to say that when you're in DC, where kind of the gay people remain closeted, kind of to this day, there's a big closeted culture in DC. You assume that your success is going to be dependent on how much you can hide about who you are. It's really intense. There's not an open discussion of sexuality. And as a person who...
So is it a don't ask, don't tell thing?
I wish. I mean, I think I was probably in the idea that didn't want to close the option of ever running for office or being part of a, political campaign or administration. And I would probably have to just stay closeted. But guess what? This is 1996 when I started working for John. That's the first year the AZT happened. So AIDS was just not becoming a death sentence. And in my entire adolescence, the specter of that pandemic meant like sex, therefore death. Like it was very clear. And I dated girls and I assimilated. I mean, I was always obviously gay. Where is the spectrum?
Except to me, when I tried to set you up with someone, a girlfriend.
I was
maybe you got really good at it. I
was very self-sabotaging as a heterosexual. But I did, I had girlfriends. But anyway, I came out much later than I should have when the coast was clear.
Yeah.
Because AIDS was no longer a factor. And I would say that I became a much better professional, much better writer, much better editor, much better creative thinker, because I had unburdened that myself. I had let that part go and could think much more freely.
Well, you're spending a lot of energy also.
Right.
Yeah. That could be going towards every other part of your life.
Still see it, still know closeted actors and performers, still know some writers who are closeted. It's rough. I feel for them, but it's living under a volcano. It's rough. By the time we met, I was out. There's something about a newbie gay who's just getting started in the gay world, and it's not really assimilated. I kind of snuck in Men's Vogue because I wasn't as maybe as queenie as I now am, however you want to call it.
Yeah,
but I was still like this uptight DC preppy kid who was well matched for the job that Jay was trying to fill.
Well, first, I just want to touch on July 16th. I mean, you'd already lost Lindsay in a plane crash.
True.
Now, now John. I mean, I don't even know how you process another loss and then watch George die without its founder. And you've talked about what it was like to work for him and what he was like. And I think when we get later down the road with Men's Vogue, it'll probably be clearer the learnings you carried forward from this experience, other than this amazing respect you have for not only him, but everyone that was working with you at the time, and how they've all become these amazing, I don't want to say people, because they were that. Sometimes it's about that special person that allows what's in you to come out, your genius to come out, right? It's not like they're making you successful, they're allowing you to make yourself successful, right?
That's right. I mean, John, for the project, everybody probably had an individual goal with him. That's kind of the way he was. He was like, tell me what your goal is for this year, and you don't have to darken my door every 5 minutes to tell me how you need me to fix it for you, but I'll have it in mind and I'll clear a path for you when I can. And for me, I was in charge of campaign 2000. So the year he died, we were gearing up for this big election that was going to be ultimately, it was it was George W. Bush versus Al Gore. It wasn't known yet. There were many. There were about 15 people who wanted to run. So it was a sort of an open post-Clinton election. And I was in charge of these personality profiles based on a famous book called What It Takes, where you would really understand the person who decided they thought they could be leader of the free world. Like, who were they? What made them?
Right.
And that was our project together. And I was commissioning the writers and editing them and doing the photography. And then eventually I wrote one or two. But that was, that was my mission.
Yeah.
And whatever was happening among our colleagues, because he did put us against each other, like creative competition. And whatever happened didn't matter because he was going to make this thing happen for me. And it did. It was great. So he died in July. I know that the day that he died, I was with Paul Begala and this guy, Tony Blankley, who was a conservative commentator. And we were doing a panel in front of young Democrats in DC. And then I went to the White House and I was organizing this profile with Al Gore and a kind of long reported thing that Lisa DiPaolo was going to do. I flew back that night. So I just did one of those.
But you hadn't heard yet at this point.
Well, wait, not yet. So,
okay.
So this is Friday. I remember that. So I think I must have flown down that morning, like one of those shuttle things. We were so hardworking, Jill. I don't think people understand.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So fly down to DC, do a public event. I think I've moderated 2 of them. Go to the White House, take a press secretary to work, get on the plane to try and get to the office for Friday because you know that there's stuff you're going to do on the weekend. So the plane is slightly delayed. I get to the office at 7:30. They're all gone. It's a summer Friday. And there's a stack from John, and somebody said, John was looking for you. I'm like, ugh. And I know it had to do with Ann Coulter and that he had something that he wanted me to discuss with Ann in a legal column she was writing. I go home. I'm exhausted. I fall asleep, wake up at like 5:30 in the morning, turn on the TV, and his plane is missing. It's already on CNN. But like,
so that you see it before you hear from it. Oh, because do you have iPhones then?
No, I had a Nokia. I had a sick Nokia.
So
but anyway,
that's how. So you're up early. So they're seeing it before anyone else would have.
I'm meant to talk to Lisa DiPaolo about what I just worked on. I am sure that he's dead. It's still in that, like, what do they call it? They're looking for it, and then it goes to recovery, whatever.
Yeah,
they have all these terms.
No, I know. Listen, I remember exactly where it was because I had gone out late at night in LA and I missed my flight. So I was out of the hotel, the L'Ermitage, staying with a friend, because I couldn't squeak out another night. And I was in that, I hope he landed parachuted out or something on an island somewhere. That's
Saturday morning, and I do go to the office, but when I wake up and I see that footage, I know just at a cellular level that he's dead. And I know that from Lindsay's death, there is just a kind of adrenalized numbing that happens when you're receiving that kind of trauma. And it's sort of spiritual, but it's also like I'm just going to call it somatic, like it's protecting you from like a blow.
Right.
But, diligent, closeted, got to keep working dude goes to the office, and we're getting slammed with phone calls. They're like those crazy TV crews. It's just like a movie. You're calling.
And this is a Saturday
in July. And you had those, we all have voicemails.
Answer machines.
Yeah, so you had to call your answering machine and listen to it.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I had, within the first 24 hours, I had 150 phone calls. And remember, I was a reporter, so I knew almost every reporter in every newsroom who I had worked with. It was like, oh, I know someone.
Yeah.
And I saw the whole array of people being sympathetic or sneaky to try and get information about this breaking story. And it just, Lindsay's death was public. It was a news event. And this one was too. And there's not a lot. I mean, there's plain, and it's just, I guess you just want to say it's chilling.
Yeah.
You feel very alone in your feelings, and you feel surrounded by glare and attention that's not well-meaning.
Right.
And there's attention that's meaningful too. Like, that's great too. Like, my friends were my friends. Some of them like jumped to literally answer my phone or make sure I'm fed or make sure that I leave my difficult office and difficult apartment and go where they knew I would be loved. I have really good friends, and that all worked out. Okay. It forged a deeper connection in a lot of ways.
Right.
I was not dating anyone.
Right.
I had dated someone. John and Carolyn had given me advice about it. But I was dating a woman.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And they knew two of them, two of the women. And they tried to set me up too. It was all so sad, but it was never going to happen. And once John had died and I was in real grief with other people, other colleagues, our lives were thrown into this kind of chaos. I really went in a gay direction, like sex as therapy.
Just life's too short. Fuck it.
Exactly.
Like, seriously, look.
Just like you heard me say that I gave up. Like Lindsay's death drove me toward this journalistic purpose. John's death drove me toward a personal purpose.
And how did that, as I said, it's the death of two things, right? I mean, obviously the human, but then it's also all of this work too. Like, when you guys I have yet to ever go to a startup of any sort. The point is to build this and to see, you're doing the legwork at the bottom. So it's like, where do you go from there? And then the aftermath, like before you're ready to like, let's do it again. Did everyone stay together during that? Was there, because sometimes that can go either way, right? When you're having to start doing cuts, if you're going to try to keep it going, and then everyone wants to be the star on the way out, and all of that, like fighting for the same jobs on the outside. Like, how did that wrap up?
It was an extensive demise. Like, it took a long time. The core was obliterated. The people who stayed on were not whole. Like, there was a new guy who is, I'll just say his name is Frank Lally. And he came from like Money magazine, and he could not have been more different than John. He was a sort of practiced hand for a business magazine, and he was going to make this a tightly run ship. The French people who owned it saw a commercial future because John's tragic death created interest in what this product was. And they thought, well, we should give it a shot, if not just to recoup their losses, but to honor his memory. Maybe a different manager could create something more sustaining. And that was not this manager. And I stayed on. I think if he died in July, I was there till January, but I was mostly on the road. Remember, I was like this Campaign 2000 person. But, just to bring it back to where you're from, I spent a lot of time in Iowa and New Hampshire. And New Hampshire was like the Boston media market. And I would like literally get hugs from people when they knew that I was from George, because that Kennedy connection to that voting population was so intense. And that tragedy was felt at a personal level in many households. So that was kind of a bittersweet reconnection with the memory of John when I was in Massachusetts for an extended period of time. I mean, I was in New Hampshire. But I took this other .com job that was very interesting, but it's too much to go into. And I was on the campaign trail, and that fell apart. And I wrote for New York Magazine for a while. Then I left politics. There was this amazing man called Robert Thompson, and he gave me a column in the Financial Times to write about TV. And with this freelance contract, I was able to write for I had a backbone, I had a salary, and I could write for other places. But then I really became a gay man in New York City, and then in the early 2000s, and I just had a great time, and I met
Yeah.
all these people, and it just got me ready for when we started to work together.
Right.
There really were so many gay men in our orbit
Yeah.
on the
Oh,
art side, on the art side.
exactly. So George folds in early 2001. You've
Yeah.
talked about kind of what happened next. And when Men's Vogue comes calling in 2005, another startup, another experimental men's
I'm just
magazine.
built for it. Just built for it.
Why say yes? It's almost like you're destined for risky magazine experiments. Okay, so before we kind of dive in, I just want to know, what had you heard about Jay Fielden before you?
We had a mutual friend, a guy named Warren St. John, and they had been roommates. And I did not know much about him. I knew he was a New Yorker magazine alumnus, and that he had taken on this role at Vogue, which is a very storied role as the arts editor.
Mhm.
And there's often a straight man who did that in the history of this great women's magazine. So that's about all I knew. I knew that he cared about poetry. I knew that he was from Texas. That's it.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
we had one meeting, and I wore my Helmut Lang suit that I bought at George, and I don't know. We really hit it off. And
Okay. Well, let me give the little intro. So before we get into the evolution of the magazine, let's talk about the first impressions. You were there from the
yeah.
beginning, deputy editor, later editor at large. Let's talk about Jay's office for our listeners. This was not your typical Condé Nast setup. Years later at Town and Country, a reporter described it as an ultra-masculine, Mad Men style office. He had his well-stocked bar, and I quote, complete with bar glasses by Trader Vic's, monogrammed French napkins, and an antique Hermes chess piece. He literally turned his office into a cocktail lab. He told the Post, there's a purpose beyond making me look like I need to go to AA. He had a tomahawk on his desk, an actual tomahawk. He said, if anyone gets out of line, there's nothing like a tomahawk to get their attention. Can you imagine Anna saying that? It's like he was building this fortress of masculinity inside Condé Nast. But here's the contradiction. Jay told the New York Times that he was sensitive that men might be self-conscious about reading Men's Vogue and the company say of their fellow commuters. He thought his Texas background gave him unique insight into, quote, this feeling that men have about their masculinity and what they associate with a magazine like Vogue. So, with first impressions,
Yeah.
what did you make of that vision? And then let's compare it to George. The culture, the leadership, the vision. JFK Jr. versus Jay Fielden. Making politics sexy versus making men care about Vogue. The energy at George was confident, effortless, quietly magnetic. JFK Jr. didn't have to prove anything. There was no smoke, no mirrors, no dick-swinging bravado. He was the thing everyone else was trying to perform. He could walk into a room, smile, and everyone, men, women, straight, gay, leaned in. At Men's Vogue, it felt like the opposite. Jay performing masculinity as theater, the bar cart, the tomahawk, the bourbon swagger, the need to make Vogue safe for straight men. What was that shift like for you, moving from JFK Jr.'s natural charisma to Jay Fielden manufactured machismo?
That's very thoughtful.
How did that change the dynamic, the way people worked, the tone, the creative risk taking?
I would say that, what's right about your definition of them is that John had so much that he would just give. Nobody could really take from John. He was definitely trying to prove who he could be in the world.
Right. Yep.
But he did not meet anyone with a sense of
or disproving the world, or
yeah.
disprove. He's up against preconceived or assumptions too. Let's remember, he didn't even have the chance to necessarily prove who he was, because he was up against even the John, which he was never called, like things like that, right? Everyone knows you, but you don't know the right me. Like that
But
must be
he went far from the lane that was set out for
right,
him
right,
and went into media. I would not say that that was a welcome idea
right,
among any of his relatives,
right,
any of them.
right, right, right.
And it was not just scoffed at, he was scorned for it
Yeah,
privately.
yeah.
Um, Now, Jay, I would say the biggest factor that you didn't get to mention is that he had Anna above him. And she creates opportunities, but she is in the foreground. And it's hard to step in front of a person like that. Even if you are trying to be the man of the men's magazine, you
Right.
still have this word Vogue and this woman that you report to who has great ideas and
Mm,
strong perspective and extensive relationships. So I felt like Jay's challenge was all of our challenges. How do we define away from
mm,
that empire that you were a part of for decades?
right. And then
It
and it's on the cover. So there's no even
right,
pretending. Interesting. I never even that was a way to almost don't forget.
right.
Like,
Yeah. I mean, it's not just like, hey, there's Vogue and you're a man and you're reading a magazine with Vogue on the front. It's that there is an active, I think the New York Times
yeah.
called her like America's top creative executive. She's an enormous resource that we all answer to and rely on, but we have to say, hey, here's this thing that only we could think of. No, not true.
Right. Right.
She
Right.
is
Right.
bringing us Annie. She is bringing us
Yes.
Mario. She is bringing us
Roger
Bruce Weber,
Federer, Tiger Woods, like
Jeffrey Steingarten,
Obama.
Robert
Yeah.
Hughes, A. Gill. Now, what I would say, Jay and I really believed in each other. And when the project got started, you did not have the big office
Right.
when
Yeah.
for at least a year.
Yeah.
His trappings came later through Jesse Carrier. He worked with Anna's decorator to
Yeah.
create that space, which was clever. Um, but let me just
But the
say,
reason I bring up that space, and we can get into it later, and because that is the space you're going into multiple times a day. That's the space that you're having serious conversations. That's what you're looking at. That's the space. That's what you're enclosed in. That's a space that you're having idea sessions. That's a space where you're hearing bad news. That's a space where you're hearing good news. It's in that space. And there's something about a space like that for you. I'm just saying to
as a gay man,
yeah,
because I was so matching.
yeah,
Yes. Now, I mean, I think more than I'm just going to talk about the idea of proportionate reaction.
yeah.
I thought that Jay made a magazine and made an office and made a team that reflected his values. To some degree, I was never going to fit in that. I just am not like all the categories that he is like. I'm not straight. I don't want to single out all of his attributes, but
Right.
I think the
Yeah.
more that anyone would know that I would be apart from his POV. The thing that he appreciated about me is the thing that John appreciated about me, that I could get people into the magazine that would take a lot of doing and would be a risk for them to be in our pages. John, I told you, trusted me to get these presidential candidates and other public figures into George. It's a bigger stretch than you might imagine. And Men's Vogue, I booked Barack Obama for the cover. I think it was the third issue. That didn't come through our cover maestro, Jill Demling. That came from
Right.
me.
Or from Anna, I
Really,
guess. Yeah.
it didn't. No,
Yeah.
me badgering. We of course had the ace in the hole, which is, I mean, the ace in the hand, which is Annie's going to take your picture, which is
Right.
great.
Right.
And Annie's outtakes wound up on their homepage for the campaign. Like it was a
Right.
majestic shoot. And Jay was not immediately for it. And then when it was on the cover, he really expressed confidence in this project, which I was for all along. And then it made a moment and it was in the New York Times. And I just remember, of course, this is not something I was witness, but Cy in their print order meeting said to Jay, do this again. Like we had
Wow.
made a mark in the company. Now, Obama in 2005 was not, was it, what year was it? It was 2006. Um,
I remember the cover very well. That's all I know. I can picture.
there was an inside portrait of Annie that Annie found where Obama was on the steps of the Capitol. He was a senator. And there were a group of school kids who were touring.
So was it so this is September 2006. So.
There you go. In our piece, which made news, Jacob Weisberg, native son of Chicago, got him to talk about presidential ambitions in a way that made news. Wow. And so, we were on the map. We were part of a conversation.
And we weren't flimsy with the first one with George Clooney. I mean, the first cover of a new magazine is the most important. It sets the tone. It sets the comparison. Who's done it before? George and Obama.
And Jay had original ideas, like George should be dressed in this kind of seasonal outfit. He was seated, and I think we had many options, but the one he chose was he was seated, and they had this kind of gold typography, and he had
on the film set,
a camel coat.
Yeah.
But what Jay would say, and I thought there's a lot of wisdom in how you set it up, is that there was a group of powerful men. You said 35, and there's an income level in mind, that were talking to each other, but there was never a magazine capturing that conversation or feeding into it.
Right.
And GQ had excellent features and enormous resources, but it didn't get there. It was slightly younger.
And I remember something like, and tell me if this is somewhere that Ralph Lauren Purple Label could advertise.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
So this is where the Purple Label advertises, right?
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
John Lobb shoes, those British brands. We had a lot of Savile Row coverage. In our first issue, we had the visionary Tom Brown. I would say that I think that Jay and Russell Lebowski and Ryan Cadiz, we were all like this little cell. Steve Watson. The thing that really gelled for us was a shoot that Camilla Nickerson did. And it was it was a modern shooting party in the English countryside that only she could assemble and only she could have styled. But that image, I think that image was ultimately on Jay's wall. But it brought something home to all of us, that there was I think Jay had a phrase, he is so good at display copy. And one of the terms I remember he said was traditions, new direction. And he labored at these, he was a poet.
Yeah.
So he really went deep in these connections among the words. And you could see these people who were more or less our age, we were in our mid-30s, living in the countryside, coming together, dogs, guns. I mean, it's not radical, and it's not.
But it's that same thing that Vogue is, or what Vogue used to. And Julian Deese talks about it, and many people like aspirational. It's not supposed to be what you see every day. Yeah.
But as for your side of the company, he wanted photographers to try something different and have environmental portraits exclusively. Try not to do studios if we could afford not to. I can think of some that we did.
Yeah.
I remember to distinguish visually from GQ and Details and Vitals and Cargo, it's like no models jumping on trampolines, which works in other contexts.
Yeah.
But that was not going to be, we were going to be grounded.
Yeah.
We weren't going to do Alan Flusser rules about how to this, how to that. Don't wear flip-flops.
Was it kind of like, okay, here's what we're going to take from Details and not take. This is what we'll do from Men's Health and not do.
20 years later, your listeners are not going to be surprised about the conversations that we tried to start. Like, the foodie culture existed in men's magazines, but we kind of went deeper with somebody like Jeffrey Steingarten and others. Like, I remember we wrote about Alinea in Chicago and molecular gastronomy. And I remember Jay had a really good point about how men in the demographic we were looking for, they trade tips, almost like business. They exchange information freely, but never didactic, never like, don't do this, don't do that. You're this if you that. And that goes for medicine, like your personal, we had a section called regimen, like all your health advice. that went for personal details, like the things that you can pack that make your business travel smoother. I
Right.
mean, this is all second nature to service journalism now, but it was kind of
Yeah.
new.
Yeah.
And the layer that I would say Jay and his team put on it was really elegant wording, excellent page design, and then Miles Eldridge, all these still lives that
Yeah.
we did that were
Mm-hmm.
really storytelling in the back of the book. These beautiful houses shot by Francois Hollard or Noe DeWitt, who shot Alex's house, my friend Alex Carlton in Maine. He shot
Oh my
his
God.
antique-filled place on the cliffside of Cape Elizabeth.
Yeah. Didn't
Um,
he say real quick? He said he wanted to take a bit from the New Yorker, the glamour of Vogue, and the cosmopolitan sparkle of Esquire of the late 60s and 70s, before it seems the world was divided into gay and straight. But we're in 2005, 2008. So that divide is very real, right? What do you remember him pointing out that time period? And it was the time period just Esquire and specifically what it looked like when he
yeah, I
was
think it's interesting that we had those references for what we wanted to do, but I remember more focusing on what don't we see in the marketplace,
right. Okay. Yeah.
Where are the guys in suits? Actually, we did beards, which was kind of controversial. Tavo Somer and Freeman's, that whole
Yeah.
crowd,
Yeah.
Valley, we shot them. We were the first ones. There was kind of a neglect of American, what we now call heritage brands, in favor of French and Italian brands. So we tried to capture that. And I would say Anna was, well, I don't know, because Anna never said it to me, but she was thought to be resistant to putting beards in the magazine. But then beards with suits looked great. So I'm like, what
Yeah.
the hell?
Okay. So let me just sprinkle some questions in, and
Yeah.
then you keep going. But okay, how did all of this shape what you could create versus what you wanted to create? What stories or perspectives couldn't make it into the magazine? Then by September 2008, Jay's launching new taglines like "Style is how you live." Amy Odell's joking your tagline should be "Because being a little gay is still straight." And we're still searching for identity. Even after being named Startup of the Year, Jay's whole vision was about this pre-1970s world. The timing is brutal. March 2008, you're expanding, subscriptions up 60%. October 30th, 2008, the announcement comes down. So just laying the land too with the taglines. Amy Odell, hilarious. I can't
Yeah.
believe she really wrote that.
I don't remember that at all. But okay,
Because
here's what I
being a little
remember.
gay is still straight.
I would say that even as I joined it, when there were very few of us, I would tell my straight friends about my new job. And then we would be out to drinks or with other straight people and like, he's at this magazine called Men's Vogue and it's not gay. Can you believe it? And then you have to kind of overcompensate, like,
Yeah,
I know, and I'm so gay.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And I, okay, rolling forward.
yeah.
I was then completely committed to its success. And I had like this Obama project, and we did a McCain thing, and we did a Tony Blair thing later. I wrote a Brian Williams cover story.
Mm.
I knew that I had momentum in this thing if I could keep it going. I knew that as they expanded and hired more straight people, on the features side, I was the only gay man. I was the only gay person. There was not a lesbian either. There were gay men in fashion and in photo and in art department. And they were my friends and we were crazy about each other. But it was interesting to be the
But
only gay
they also
voice.
came from Vogue, right?
Correct,
So
mostly,
let's
yeah.
be clear, because a lot of this, okay, just setting the scene for people out there, when they start up a magazine, when Vogue specifically did an offshoot magazine, we did it with Vogue Living, I did it with Teen Vogue. So this is the third. It's a skeleton team. Most everyone in the skeleton are from Vogue, either moving over permanently, like Jay did, like Amy Astley moved to Teen Vogue, like Hamish had Vogue Living, stayed, Hamish Vogue
Mm-hmm.
Living. Then we're all the Vogue staff working on them until there's a proof of concept, ad dollars, and little by little, they're building their own team.
You
But
did the amazing Colin Farrell one well before my time.
yeah, and David Beckham. David with Victoria as concerts. But this just comes into my mind because we don't know who would have been hired for all those positions in general had it been the new editor-in-chief versus, people Anna had been comfortable with, people that could spread across both, that came from Vogue.
The other thing about her vision at that moment is she was expanding into interiors magazines, and she did Vogue Living with Hamish and Caroline Irving, and we all were in the same expansion office space.
Right.
But what I want to say is something that I hinted at you before, because a year ago, and this is name dropping, but I got invited to a weekend in Venice where my friend was interviewing Dion von Furstenberg. And I was seated with these people that you would only get around Dion von Furstenberg's table. And at the end of the night, I greet this one man, and I was like, "Oh, I'm a great admirer of your work, Jürgen Teller." And he was there to shoot Pope Francis the next day at a women's prison. So like, this is not my daily life, but at one point in my life, Edward Enninful is there, your friend. Yeah. I'm just at this small dinner party. And Jürgen Teller says to me, and I'm speaking out of turn, he doesn't know that I'm saying this on a podcast. Yeah. He's like, I don't think he said I hate Men's Vogue, but he expressed a strong dislike for Men's Vogue. And I said, "I'm sorry to hear that. I don't remember you having a bad experience. Did we work with you?" And he said, "I photographed a campaign ad for Marc Jacobs, and we did a specific photograph, a portrait, for a Marc Jacobs ad designed to run in your earliest editions of Men's Vogue. And it was a photograph of two men kissing by a tree, fully clothed, at a remove. And it was your friend and previous guest, Dick Page, and his partner.
Right.
Legendary craftsman. And this was Marc Jacobs and Jürgen's and Dick Page's sense of, hey, good luck to you guys.
Yeah.
And people at a decision level that I'm not included in rejected the ad.
And had you seen it ever? Was it ever laid out, or did it never make it even into the edit side?
Not to me. I don't know, but not to me.
Would you normally have seen a special project like that?
I think later, when my friend William Lee was our publisher, we kind of looked at ads for placement.
I wanted to know if that was maybe,
but not yet.
Yeah, or maybe that's why you weren't. Yeah, I was just trying to.
When I thought about telling you this, I was like, well, I don't want to bring it up if it's. But it was written about at the time.
Oh yeah, and it was written about. Yeah, it's around. Like, I actually, because of how much it's kind of out there, I thought it was an ad that ran. I didn't know it was a partnership. And therefore, because it didn't run in Men's Vogue, it didn't run anywhere.
I don't know the answer to that, but that's my sense of it.
Yeah, no, it was it was a collaboration with the magazine.
Well, not with the magazine, but for the magazine.
For the magazine, yes.
Right. So now, X number of decades later, how do I feel about it? I feel like, okay, that's one of the things that I buried inside me to continue competing, to show up every day for this mission that I had a unique opportunity and move on. Now, in the sense of like, is that self-respecting of me to have stayed? Now, I think you and I,
it's survival. It's survival. Ned, real quick. A lot of us, and it's not that you're making a conscious decision at that time to stay. My experience is sometimes the blinders, you don't remember putting them on. It's almost like they were put on you when you start somewhere. I don't know, things, and, when people talk about microaggressions, and obviously I can't put myself in some of the extreme situations, but I can, as a woman, put myself in situations that have to do with life, and especially with Me Too and all of that. You think back and, oh my God, now you realize you didn't even know it wasn't acceptable. You didn't even know you could say no. You didn't know you didn't even know that was it just what you don't know, what you don't hear, what seems normal, what seems it's always like this. This is what it's like. All of those things. I think a lot of things you bury down, your brain buries so you can survive. And maybe
Hmm.
now when a trigger happens, you can start remembering things that you didn't see at the time or that you just
Yeah,
accepted as how it is. What's there to fight?
I can relitigate other things that were bad, like I can't remember the subjects, but I can remember we photographed somebody with his husband, and we chose not to run the photo, but also to the mention of the husband was removed from the article. Um, I
And no real
remember
conversation about that.
I would not be part of that conversation.
Interesting.
And I kind of over the years, I thought it would get better, and my compromise to keep working on my projects would make this less of a problem, but I felt like it probably became more of a problem. And it impacted my ability to stay there ultimately or be committed like I had been in the beginning. I had a relationship with my colleagues and mentors at the New York Times who had let me be a movie and TV critic over the years. I had, Laurie Jones and Anna were so good to me, I have to say, like over and over. And they often said that I had a kind of future at Vogue if I wanted to leave at some point. I knew that, but
Yeah.
I thought that this place had me in it and had valued my contributions because they were unique and there wasn't going to be anybody else delivering presidential candidates or news
Right.
anchors. So, you know, I stayed, but ultimately I was ready to go right as it collapsed. And
Right.
and I was writing and I wasn't editing anymore. And I had this great experience with my friend Amanda Brooks, where we started something for the Men's Vogue website that was called In Her Eyes, and it was what we now are so used to with street photography of out for the day, like what people wear on the street that's eye catching. And Amanda was so good at that. We had a great run.
Yeah.
And I do remember she told me this one thing that has just stayed in, and we reminded ourselves recently, like she said that sometimes she looked at the magazine. She said it's so straight, it's camp. Like
Well, let me
it's
ask you
so
because I kind
determined
of
not to look gay.
yeah, because I do want to dig into something, the elephant in the room. Okay, so both at George and Men's Vogue, you're creating these visions of aspirational masculinity, political power at George, luxury lifestyle at Men's Vogue.
Okay,
But you're a gay man crafting content or ideas or you're creating content, assigning pieces, editing cover stories, agreeing on cover talent based on your reader, and that's the straight
true,
male reader. You're in
true.
Jay's uber masculine office with the tomahawk and the bourbon, creating fantasies for men who might not even pick up the magazine because of the Vogue name. So navigating that space, and I mean, I know that it's kind of like it's a job. So, I'm not the Vogue reader. I am the Vogue reader, but I'm not that girl that can afford anything back then. Now where it's much more me, but it's worked. It's like anything. You're writing, Ryan Murphy shows, you're part of creative projects. You're thinking about the viewer too, right? You're thinking about,
True.
so that's something we do as work. But like for me and Tani Goodman, like it's more than a job, right? Because there's just something about anything with Anna running it because it's more than a job to her, right? It
It is.
has
Yeah,
to be more than a job.
it's an
Not to say we're
institution and a
yeah,
community,
yeah. So
and
I mean,
and something. It's something
we're
today that it might not
yeah,
be tomorrow because
right.
it's so full of possibility.
But it seems also to be like that's not something I would buy, but I can see the reader wanting it. Like if that's all day, like was there situation? No, because
It wasn't like that.
yeah.
No,
Okay,
I
so
mean, in some ways, I have friends who make menswear, and you're not going to lose a gay buyer with a mask costume.
Right.
You know,
Let's say, were there people you wanted to feature? Because I ran into this experience that weren't considered Vogue. And for the reasons explained to me, I ended up leaving. But with this, I know exactly what it was about, what words were said, who it was in reference to, how that made me feel, and that it was time. Did you come up against clear situations like that where someone deserved to be included, and because of, other than someone's husband, I hope that husband wasn't like so important, like that he was cut out, or if it was just, yeah, let's just concentrate on. There's ways to spin that, right?
I have a guess about who it was, and I'll tell you later, but I'm not sure. Um, anyway, I
But
would
were there
say that
people that you did
I
the
would say that I
fight for,
probably
like that you'd fight for, or that you just knew that wasn't worth it? You didn't want to be the squeaky wheel, because we know what happens to those.
probably did some self-editing and knew
Yeah.
that, well, that person wasn't going to fly. I also remember thinking it was very odd to have all these very straight guys looking at these photos of men uh, and saying who was good looking and who
That
wasn't,
is
and they were all straight.
hilarious.
Like,
That's so
I'll tell you who's good looking.
yeah, exactly. That's funny.
You got the expert right here, and you're like
Well,
deciding.
I mean, you have a room of dandies. I mean, Hud Morgan. I mean, you have dandies that love
not
fashion.
not all of
Some
them,
of
but
them. Oh,
yes,
some of them,
yes.
yeah.
But anyway, so did I would say that I brought up a gay man who had an extraordinary house in LA, and I knew right away.
But would
That it
they
wasn't.
ask? Would you be asked if they're married, or how would you? How would the
No, no,
Google?
like a famous gay man in Hollywood.
Okay.
I'm sure I pitched his house for
Okay.
a house
Yeah,
piece,
I didn't know
and
if
I
it
could
was.
just say, I don't
Yeah.
think he's us. You know,
Yeah.
like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Got it.
And looking back now, both George and Men's Vogue failed.
Oh, and
Yeah.
that man's house has been in
Archi-
AD, and come on,
yeah.
they're good houses. They
Yeah.
were plenty good.
So looking back, both George and Men's Vogue failed. Both were trying to transcend divisions that maybe couldn't be transcended. You wrote this to me last night. It's so funny to read about the magazines as two failures, and what each could have done differently was to be less afraid and more like Ned. I'll say that without total egotism, but it's true. I was always pushing for things that the editors were too chicken to try. What do you see now that wasn't visible then? What opportunities were missed?
Well, I'm going to go with John because it's so legendary. He was
Yeah.
very afraid of doing the Monica Lewinsky story with complete freedom, and he didn't want to find a POV on it. I mean, I think I know what his POV was, which is that everyone, and look, Ned Martel is the perfect example. Everyone lies about sex. And Bill Clinton having this kink with this young person was consensual, and it's not really our business on the scale of this story.
Well, and he has his father too, so he's not gonna,
If he had talked about that as openly as I just did, it would have been a braver statement than pretending it wasn't happening. If he had said, what I was pushing for was, this is a bad use of the prosecutorial power of government, and Clinton is keeping this problem alive by lying.
Right.
And all he needs to do is embrace the truth, and the apparatus that's attacking him and minimizing his potential would go away.
Right.
So that was what, egotistical Ned Martel was arguing for at the time. I wasn't alone.
Right.
But in the retrospect, I do think that if that perspective was listened to by the many of us who expressed it, the magazine
Well,
would
is
have
that
had
when you're too tied up, when you're thinking about the magazine, but yourself too? He has a legacy. He has, I mean, that's a complicated decision, right? Because people aren't going to be able to separate you to your editor-in-chief hat and your Kennedy hat, right? Like, this is an editorial decision, right? There's no...
He had changed magazines for the better by creating this this branded personality running the magazine. The magazine company wanted John on the cover, which he refused to do. But then Martha Stewart or Rosie O'Donnell were all too pleased to do that, and other people like
Right.
Rachel Ray, that became a whole category that he, in effect,
I'd be interested.
started.
Did he have a picture of himself on the editor's letter?
He had a picture of himself, and he had a
Okay.
picture of himself when he would do the Q&As.
Okay, because Anna is one of the few that has never, I mean, I love her for that. You
I
do
love her for
not
that,
see
too.
her picture.
Okay, so back to what was I saying in the note to you last night? What would have been a braver stance for Men's Vogue? I actually think, because I've existed, sort of in the preppy universe of people who had gotten to C-suites, or people who had written books, or people who had made movies, there's a kind of matter of factness about gays as your colleagues and peers that would have been a brave stance for a magazine 20 years ago to take. I was existing in that space in Condé Nast as a gay equal to straight people. Couldn't we just depict it as normal?
Right.
It was our actual life.
Right.
I was at the cafeteria with Jim Nelson, who is the first out gay magazine editor of GQ, and Mark Holgate, who is our friend and colleague. These are valuable, smart people. The idea that we were different or it would risk a readership to be depicted as ourselves in a magazine like Men's Vogue is absurd. And it would have been a brave stance to say, this is how we interact in this very progressive, very successful company. And let's send it out into the world as a way forward.
Yeah.
I think it would have been a better product had we done that.
Yeah.
So that's what I meant last night.
When I've had people on from Vogue, whether it's Adam Green and Mark Healy talking about, Condé Nast, the man, it's curation, but you curate by omission, right?
Correct.
So
absolutely,
you don't put a Broadway show in there that you're going to give a bad review to. Your bad review is they're not in there.
Right.
So I
loved that. I loved Adam's interview.
By taking out a whole population of men, that is the omission, right?
Erasure. It is.
Yeah.
I mean, and it is actually like the creative, like Anna, she deserves her own Tony Award for her championship of Broadway and off Broadway. And that is a community that is dominated by gay men.
But it just doesn't seem like a good business decision, because you would think GQ is, and is Jim Nelson, we're pre-Jim Nelson at this time, right? Or is it, he's there. No. But that is, no beards, that's a whole thing.
An hour couldn't have been more powerful at Vanity Fair.
Right, but why, but we didn't have a magazine there that was even including, and I would like to know what the breakdown is on who spends more, right there, because why cut out a population of men that are actually the ones spending on the brands that are being advertised? It's just, you don't have to do, whatever people thought Details was doing with the Vin Diesel, the pink shirt, whatever that whole kerfluffle was, but to consciously omit any trace of it seems just counterintuitive for a business.
For X number of years, we had William Lee as our publisher, who was so talented that we lost him to this big company priority portfolio. Gay men worked perfectly well with great success with straight men. And that should have been the ethos.
Yeah.
I understand why that they were running away from past failures, but I'm just saying we were succeeding by modeling this existence that could have been in the pages.
No, exactly. So Men's Vogue folds October 2008. You've been through 2 magazine deaths. How did you process the end? And, we didn't go into too much left compared to when it was a forced exit. But tell us about the end, where your head was at post-mortem. And then finding your way to Ryan Murphy's world, from carefully navigating straightness at these men's magazines to working with someone who puts queerness front and center. How did those magazine years prepare you for this new chapter? And then just the whole kit and caboodle, looking back at George and Men's Vogue now from the vantage point of working on shows like American Horror Story and Hollywood, what do you see differently?
Okay, so Men's Vogue, I think I left mentally before I left physically. Yeah, I remember at the end, I was really a writer. I was an editor at large, and I did a cover story about Patrick Dempsey. He's a race car driver,
Yeah.
And I remember we spent days together. It was so fun. It was in Florida. And I just remember at one point, he was like, oh, just come in here. It was like too loud to be heard outside because of the engines. And he like stripped naked in front of me. And I was like, he doesn't know I'm gay. Like, the Men's Vogue has done too good a job at convincing the straight person that everybody is straight. Anyway, when I was reporting that, it was kind of when the Bear Stearns, when Wall Street was falling apart. And I do remember telling Jay, like, this is a really bad thing for us, for this magazine. And the magazine was trying Bugattis on the cover and be like Rob Report. And they were doing all this, like, there is a way you can listen to marketing. What are they called? The studies, cover studies. Yeah. They can send you right out of existence. Like, you have to absolutely just go. Like, Jay had so many good ideas, like putting Daniel Day-Lewis or Viggo Mortensen or Ben Stiller on the cover, that the market probably wasn't demanding, but he knew that they were right, and they were right.
And there's a balance. That's what I did. You know, for every Sandra Bullock, you can have a Cate Blanchett. This is before social media. Then you even have to think about that. So that would have been a whole other. I don't even know if it would have survived, or maybe it would have.
So we closed the week before the Obama election, and in the intervening months, I was interviewed by the Washington Post, and I became the style editor of the Washington Post, and I was there for 4 years. Totally different experience. We no longer had this like crazy photographic budget, but I took some of what I learned from Condé Nast and inserted it in this. It was like having a daily magazine for a while with like critics and gossip columns and features, and it was a great experience. It was the first term of the Obama administration. So exactly the context I made at Men's Vogue came into play. I left there. Ryan Murphy has been a friend of mine for a long time, and I would share my experiences in journalism, and that was for him the road not taken. He had started as a journalist, and I always had it in mind, like, maybe I'd work in TV, but only if I could work with somebody like Ryan Murphy. And then when the time was right, after the 2012 election, he brought me on. I first worked at Glee, and he was starting to work on shows that required a lot of historical research. First, The Normal Heart, and he wanted a brain to help him. He's an excellent researcher. He almost doesn't need anyone, but just to dig up things about real characters that he was going to start portraying. And obviously he has this glorious 12-year run of bringing buried history back into screens and telling them episodically. So I started on that with him 13 years ago, and
wow, I can't believe it's been that long.
Yeah, but like you said, I went from a sort of troubled Condé Nast idea of what a gay man should be. DC was really tough, really orthodox. I had a lesbian boss, Liz Spade. She was my champion. All my bosses were so good to me there. Don Graham, Marcus Brauckley, Reggie Narisetti, they all were really wanting a person like me to just be an idea factory and just try and get as much done while there was time. You know, we had this internet threat that was pulling the institution apart, and in a lot of ways has. But when he got to Ryan, I was in this like intense orthodox job where people were like, I can't believe you're wearing red corduroys at the Washington Post. Like, literally just coming up to me and saying that. And I would say, they're oxblood, and I know you can't. Like, they're just really, they're coming right at you. So when I moved to Ryan's world, like literally it was Glee. And I remember my first day, and there was 10 of the actors on a soundstage, and they were lip syncing to their recording of Beyonce's Diva.
Yeah.
And take after take with cranes shooting them.
Yeah.
They were hitting their mark perfectly every time, maybe 30 takes. Doing I'm a diva.
Yeah.
And then there's a close up on Darren Chris at the end goes, a boy can be a diva too. And I was like, I think I found a workplace
Yeah.
where I actually might be able to do some things.
Oh my God. Well, looking back at this whole journey from Charlie Peters telling you the world is more interesting than you can make up to where you are now, other than Charlie, and of course, I'm sure you're going to say Anna, who were your mentors along the way and any additional mentors? Obviously, John Kennedy Jr. In addition to that, what advice would you give to young writers and editors today, especially LGBTQ ones, trying to navigate media? Because the landscape has changed, but I imagine some challenges remain.
Well, you started by asking about the like total heartbreak of my friend dying when we were 21
Mm,
years old. And I would say every writer has some emotional, it doesn't have to be a hurt, but an emotional truth that they're tapping into. I can hear it in your interviews when you express yourself and your personal history. It's what engages the audience. Almost, it's the thing they'll remember. So, as a young person, I hope people are developing that honesty with themselves about what their experiences have been, and figuring out how that leads to more complete. Like I've had things that have happened to me that I made priorities for characters that I've been assigned, characters I didn't even create. But I
mm,
knew that an experience that I had could make that character more real or make them
right.
turn in a different way. I've had questions that I directed at people I interviewed that would throw them, just like, you are, I'm very open to being surprised by your questions and how penetrating they can be. And that requires a kind of connection to what the real emotion of a situation is. So
Right.
that's the gift for any storyteller. They don't have to be visual or word or, in this face to face that we're doing. Like
Yeah.
that's just core, right?
No,
But
that's what it's interesting. I think what I've found through so many of my guests is how their own words read back to them move them.
totally. When I read your sense of mine, I definitely was tearing up,
Yeah.
which means that,
Yeah.
look, let me just tell my Jill story because I love it. But we were such compadres in
Mm,
a hostile
hmm.
place, and we really got shit done. And
Yeah.
I'm so proud of our connection and that it's lasted all these decades. But there's one moment where I had this excellent assistant named Nick Mascara, and you had a really good assistant too. And like maybe they would start dating, and we were scheming. It was so fun. And you would always have me up, and we would interview celebrities in
Yeah.
your office. But anyway, Nick was leaving. You kind of were leaning on my shoulder, and then you're like, "Well, I gotta go. I can't be around you clowns anymore." And you were walking on. You're like, "Bye, Ned. Bye, Ned's assistant."
I used to love like doing my little walk. Let's go see the boys.
And I would say that Anna too. She a mentor for me? I think she was a path clearer for me. I don't think she
Yeah.
was taking this huge personal investment in me and my growth, but we had a real connection
Yeah.
on politics, on theater, on
Yeah.
movies.
Well, she's the type that she's a mentor. She's never going to be outwardly a mentor. That's you know
right,
what I mean? She's one of those stealth mentors. Like
totally.
she knows a lot more about what's going on personally, a lot
Hmm.
more, and not because she hears it, she seeks the information.
I think
So
that's true.
there is
Um,
eyes protecting when mother's watching.
mhm.
Yeah.
And John Kennedy Jr., I can think of a time I had a really controversial article. I'm just going to tell you, it's so crazy.
Yeah.
It was about the Supreme Court and a case in our youth that was called Bowers v. Hardwick. And the Supreme Court upheld, they reasserted that all sodomy should be illegal. That was in the state of Georgia. And they were hoping that it would lead to copycat laws and make that nationwide. That is real. So we found a story that said that the Bowers, the attorney general who brought that case, had a mistress who came to us and told us the whole story. And she had a line that was killer. She said, if Mike Bowers is against sodomy, then he's a hypocrite. It was much better than that.
Yeah.
We published it. It wound up on the front page of a Sunday New York Times. Remember, Sundays were so important. And it was written about, and I got a voicemail, back to voicemail, of John Kennedy saying, and this is a term you use, might as well just say it. He's like, Ned Martel, you big swinging dick, you dear. Front page of the New York Times on Sunday. Who would have thought this this squeaky clean little magazine was going to come forward with a story about sodomy, and the New York Times is going to have to take notice. It was like really nice.
Wow.
So again, did John every day was like, Ned, what are you doing? How can I help you? Never, ever, ever. But when I did something, he would be the first to acknowledge.
Yeah. Wow.
And then lastly, the biggest MVP. Well, I've had two great mentors in Maureen Dowd, who and Alessandra Stanley, and Sam Sifton. They all really helped me at the New York Times when I was a freelancer for them. It was great. But really, Ryan Murphy is the MVP of my whole life. I mean, these 13 years have just been so eye-opening.
Yeah, we'll need a second episode just about breaking that down, breaking him down and what that's like. I mean, amazing.
Just loop it into what we've been saying.
Yeah.
He, like John and like Anna and Jay, said what's out there that people would like, but they're not asking for it. And all of Ryan's such an original, and he's from a reporting background. He's like, what's out there? What should be out there that isn't?
Right.
Not like, what are people asking for? It's like, what do I feel should be there?
Yes. Not what will our reader like, or what will our viewer like. Let's show them something that they don't know they're gonna like.
Yeah.
They haven't seen it yet. Yeah.
The people paying us aren't asking us to do it.
Perfect, But even Glee, who would have thought, it's
totally American Horror Story.
Yeah.
So anyway, it takes that kind of person to make me want to be in yet another startup, and who knows where it's going to go. But you even said Spy Magazine, I should have taken it. Spy Magazine didn't even last as long as George.
No, I know.
Magazines, your unique experience of decades working in the empire of Vogue,
I know.
Doesn't mean the others are failures. And there are people we all work with who wind up making those institutions better later on.
No, it's true. Okay, so at the end of each episode, I ask the same 7 rapid fire questions.
Ready.
This or that. AM or PM?
AM.
Text or talk?
I like to talk.
Uber or Subway?
Well, I'm in LA, so Uber.
Book or film? That's a hard one for you.
Yeah, I know.
Should we throw TV in there?
Well, let's just say screens. Lately, it's screens.
Sweet or spicy?
Spicy.
Spots or stripes?
Stripes.
Top or bottom?
It depends. Every day is different.
And one more, just for me. Who was a better editor? Not person, editor. JFK Jr., Jay Fielden.
The word nerd, is Jay. He's excellent at words. Conceptually, John had a broader vision.
Right. Okay, Ned, this has been incredible. 2 magazines, 2 failures, but what a journey. Someone on a forum wrote that Men's Vogue's premiere issue, that Clooney issue we launched, was one of the single best menswear publications they'd ever come across. That it would stand as a testament to real style. Even in failure, you created something that mattered to people. From that verbal kid in Baltimore to shaping culture at the highest levels. The magazines didn't last, but your voice certainly has. And now with Ryan Murphy, you're telling the stories you maybe couldn't tell back then. That's its own kind of victory, isn't it?
It feels like it. Thanks for that, especially when you say it. Because you the power of people who put themselves out there. So I appreciate that.
Love you.
I love the forum to start. I love this forum. I'm really glad. The more visual people who tell their stories, the more you've served a great oral history void
Yeah.
that the digital age needs. These shoots that you did took a lot of planning, a lot of visionary, a lot of improvisation, and I'm glad that all these crafts people are explaining that to new generations.
Yeah, and I have to say, like I said to Billy Norwich, like I feel like you're my brother because I've lived inside of you for so long, and it's fun. I mean, what I'll take with me more than anything is just how much more I know about all of you. Not just your work. Through researching your work, I've learned more about you as people, and
And
that,
let's say JVM and
yeah,
Adam Green,
yeah,
Jonathan Meter, Jonathan. I mean, I
yeah.
learned a lot about him.
Yeah, it's been really fascinating to really, especially with creative people in these fields that aren't the, fortune cookie teacher, lawyer, doctor. You're
Hmm.
very much intertwined with your job when it comes to artists of all sorts. So
Well, thank you for unpacking it. I think it's a real service to creatives everywhere. Keep doing it.
thank you. All right.
Well, I
So
love you back.
I love you
Love
and talk
you.
to
See
you
you soon.
soon. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, that's our show. Thanks for listening to Going Rogue, and be sure to like and subscribe. Today's show is produced by me and Maddie Rosenberg at Radio Free Rhinecliff with assistance from Maddie Kelly. Special thanks to David Vogue for our great graphics and Taras Romanov for our epic theme music. See you next Friday.